final chapter. Oh. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. Revelation 14:20. In Durer's woodcut, quote unquote, The Four Apocalyptic Horsemen, 1498, the four horsemen are not permitted to drop their dark message where they please. They are being directed by God's angels whose finger guides them. Evil and catastrophe are clearly understood to be part of a design that will ultimately reveal God's plan, hidden at present to the human mind. Such a theological interpretation, though not pleasing to much of our contemporary Western thinking, yet leaves a broad margin for human self-examination, a critical surveying of our own doings, such as contemporary Europe is undertaking now with more candor and humility than some of our political observers seem to realize. Some still erroneously report that there is no change of mind in the European psyche. There can be no doubt that a religious rebirth of profound seriousness is developing within Protestantism, Catholicism, and among the refugee Orthodox groups of Western Europe. Kierkegaard, Dostoevsky, and Nietzsche are among the guiding spirits from whose spiritual resources this Christian Renaissance is drawing much energy. Literary existentialism of the aesthetic school supplies additional, though negative, substantial of these new insights, if only through its contrasting vision of despair. Kierkegaard stands out as the one whose incisive truths and courageous personal fight have inspired the modern mind to move beyond the province of neo-orthodox thinking. He has opened our eyes to the shallowness of much of our pseudo-Christian life and to the outright deception in politics with Christianity, which Christianity has been made to serve. Europe is beginning to recognize the spiritual origin of the recent catastrophes. Kierkegaard had excommunicated himself from a sense of scrupulous sincerity, while many in official Christianity were silently slipping away from the inward ties to faith, and had been, figuratively speaking, excommunicated from the quote-unquote invisible church before they had realized it. God had become as much a matter of the past, a remote memory, as materialistic society is in danger of making him. Then, as now, membership in the Christian church was indeed part of his family inheritance, an heirloom of antiquarian value, whereas Kierkegaard demanded that we, quote-unquote, recollect forward, in an effort at becoming, not being, Christians. The moral core of Kierkegaard's attack upon the unholy marriage of state and church is widely accepted by Europe's present generation, but its spiritual implications are only beginning to be understood, and no drastic change has yet been made in the relationship of state and church. Kierkegaard's emphasis upon Christianity's prophetic mission is also receiving more of a hearing by church leaders and laymen than during his own time. The universal church is beginning to realize that it must not confine itself to representing the moral factor in the Christian message. It can never be an assembly of the righteous, but must go out to find those who are in need of its healing and prophetic message. We are learning that contradiction and condemnation are not creative. The judgment theology of Barth and Brunner has contributed a note of self-examination to our thinking. We are too apt to identify the gospel message with man's endeavor to create God's kingdom. The rejection of a quote-unquote service-minded liberalism is, on the other hand, too convenient a way out of our dilemma. Just as the theologian's flight from the immediate political and social urgencies of our time into an artificial and antiquarian orthodoxy is unacceptable to many conscientious seekers who look upon this orthodoxy as a serious loss of Christian energies. Not only the church or Christianity or so-called Christian society are in need of salvation. Vast segments of this society, which are pagan, alien, or hostile to faith, are in need of the Christian ministry. All too often, this ministry is obscured by professional language, understandable only to the trained mind, and all too often, ritual and liturgical adornment becomes the easy way out for official Christianity as it seeks to deepen spiritual life. Kierkegaard's rejection of the aesthetic way of life opens an attack upon the sentimental Sunday Christianity, with the atmosphere of respectable society, polished oratory, and decorative representation. The example of the few Christian and Protestant clerics and laymen in the mining districts of Belgium, France, and Germany, where these men and women work day after day in factory and mine with proletarians who have never heard of the Christian message, testifies to a new heroism and realism of faith. This faith is as far removed from controversies of theological seminars as from the shallow middle-class liberalism that has frequently considered its suburban comfort a God-given reward for sound moral standards. Kierkegaard invites all of us to become first and foremost citizens of the kingdom of anxiety. He demands a way of life and existential faith. The self-assurance of belief is as objectable as that of disbelief, while the indifference of the lukewarm is nothing but self-deception or an outright betrayal of the Christian cause. In like manner does Dostoevsky's chaotic world attack much of our Christian society, where everything seems well ordered in the hierarchy of society and in the moral representation of faith by the clergy. Some of his magnificent sinners find their way to God through other sinners. Some, few though, through the wisdom of official spiritual leaders. His great merit lies in dramatizing man's dualism. We live in the world of conscious error or virtue, but we are also prey to the subconscious forces and illogical drives that cause the unexpected eruptions of instincts and resentments, the hidden motives for hypocrisy and the condemnation of others that shake individuals and society out of their sense of security. The hope for security should be understood primarily as a spiritual state, a charisma that puts the burden of ministry on everyone who is thus graced. Dostoevsky himself never experienced this state with any permanence, and those few of his characters who have it see an endless stream of sinners and confused seekers coming to them for spiritual assistance. It is not their theology, but their existence as humble Christians that attract those in despair. Dostoevsky makes his point in contrasting extremes. The individual church loves forgiveness and understands, whereas the Grand Inquisitor, the outstanding representative of the visible church, condemns others, although he himself is in great need of forgiveness. The works of mercy are hidden, for God's own hand works in secret. The legend of the Grand Inquisitor is an attack upon all churchdom and all human prominence in the household of God. Its paradoxical proclamation that man does not want to be a free thinker is better understood in the second half of the 20th century than in 1880. It was a shock to the European and American mind to see how seemingly progressive nations acted precisely as the Grand Inquisitor had prophesied by laying down their freedom at the feet of rulers in exchange for bread and security. Many of our humanistic dreams for mankind have proved illusory, or because of the disillusioning experiences, all of us are now displaced people. In some sense, deracines. Our moral and political freedom is now being recognized as the great burden which the Grand Inquisitor made in his prison monologue. The fact that large nations, Germany, Japan, Russia, China, are either not ready for freedom or reject it as impracticable, stand in such appalling contrast to our American tradition that many of us have found it easier to attribute this state of affairs to the conspiracy of a few leaders abroad. We shall have to acquire a considerably greater sense of perspective and a sounder knowledge of the history, language, and literature of these nations to come close to the truth. As we have tried to illustrate, much of Dostoevsky's prophecy, too much for our comfort, have proved to be true. His claims for the Russian people as a quote-unquote God-bearing nation capable as no other nation of understanding all the world, though part of the neurotic universalism that characterized him personally, as well as many other Russian leaders, have contributed to the dynamism of the Bolshevik Revolution. This belief exists and always has existed in Russia, where the icons of Lenin and Stalin inspire it daily. National self-exaltation also exists in non-communist nations, where not only political leaders but also poets and historians have been spreading an incendiary patriotism of self-righteousness that has caused their people to look down upon other nations and to become outright threats to peace. Moscow, we now know, will not be the third Rome of which the Pan-Slavists were dreaming, but it is our hope that Christ may yet return to Russia in a manner different from such expectations. Dostoevsky, like Kierkegaard, wanted a change of heart. The virtuous will have to grow humbler than they have been found to be. The sinner ought to find the fellowship they need. Human judgment must resign before God's wisdom. The rulers of state and church everywhere must at long last open their cathedrals, Nietzsche's quote-unquote sweet-smelling caves, quote, and let Christ in, free to rule in Russia and everywhere. And the people, quote-unquote, these children, must learn to shoulder the heavy burden of freedom in order to experience how light the yoke can be. Freedom, how light the yoke can be. Freedom, how light the yoke can be. They must again want to become kings and not be satisfied with being couriers. Next to Kierkegaard's challenge, Nietzsche's attack upon Christianity has been the most powerful blow against organized religion in recent European history. His exalted praise of suspicion as a force to bear the surface respectability of Christian society corresponds to Kierkegaard's aggressive condemnation and Dostoevsky's eerie panorama of Russian society. He rejects the claims of organized Christianity that it is a moralistic institution. He calls God, quote, that which contradicts man, close quote. The fact that his philosophy of the Superman was utilized in the creation of the subhuman standards of Nazi Germany and Italy was history's most impressive rejection of his self-exaltation visions. Germany remains Europe's greatest problem. Germany's past has never produced a political revolutionary. Luther, as well as Marx, were intellectuals and spiritual leaders. Nietzsche's rebellion corroborates the impression that the German passion for extremes produces the perennial brooding over problems such as, quote unquote, what is a German? This lack of measure and balance explains the German craving for discipline and the philosophical outcry for action that has made all revolutions not much more than a noisy search for a new ruler, as Ortega y Gasset calls them. Nietzsche is the embodiment of this excessive trait, together with the boldness of thought that is the genius of the Germans. Like Gertrude, Hölderlin, Schopenhauer, and he was critical of the Germans to the point of contempt. Yet Germany remains central to his longing. Germany will never lead the nations in political wisdom. Her genius lies in the world of philosophical and religious thinking. During the last century, she was the leading nation in the various theological disciplines that has changed the face of modern Christianity everywhere. But she has also produced some of the most disturbing religious and anti-religious systems of thought that have ever migrated into the psychology of other nations. As it was her tragic fate to have given to the world a thinker of the rank of Nietzsche, who never tired of repeating that God had died. Andre Malraux has asked the question whether man in the 20th century can survive after God has died in the 19th century. His question has become mankind's greatest anxiety at a time when the genius for fission is our outstanding trait. Only for those who are unwilling to risk the never-ending experiment of faith and who have never lost the pagan stoicism of Nietzsche can Kafka's despair be the answer. His and all existentialism's delight in portraying evil and nothingness as the ultimate destiny is another fall of man away from the Christian call to transcend weakness and fear by faith. This negative harmony in man himself is a sign of moral exhaustion that needs to be interpreted as one more serious symptom of society's illness. Were Kierkegaard, Dostoevsky, and Nietzsche born too early? As it has been said of them, to their contemporaries, they were a contradiction, an offense, but also a sign. Their living presence is the meaningful gift to our generation. They could arise only in the period for which their message came too early in order to speak to us who must see it, that their message does not come too late. It is the angel's finger upon us.